So after watching the current iCarly revival episodes, yes, I'm keeping track on rewatching this revival. There was an episode that I want to review as part of my September schedule of this month, and that is this episode, I Need Space, which is mostly a Carly and Harper episode. Believe it or not, I think that this episode is a prime example onto why we're not seeing the web show more frequently compared to the original, especially when we only see bits and pieces of Carly using her camera in one of the episodes. The last episode I reviewed, she did broadcast herself involving her web show, but in this episode, she was planning on doing an interview, but unfortunately, we don't get to see much of iCarly whatsoever involving the interview itself. Mostly because she uses the camera to get some evidence, but I'm gonna get to that later. Harper is preparing a job interview involving styling, and considering that she spread most of her clothing in her apartment, which is also Carly's apartment, it's not working out for her considering that Carly is getting really annoyed by it. So she goes to Leap-In, which is where most women can spread most of their hobbies without any issue whatsoever. And the lady who's running Leap-In is Argentina, who is dating Spencer. This is Spencer we're talking about, so his character trait to hit on other women is still the same even in the original. Unfortunately, it's soon to be revealed that Argentina is actually a fraud, making most of the women around her completely miserable, and Carly and Harper have no idea what is going on. Let me just say this right now, every time I completely look at characters like these, I instantly think of Neville, but at the same time, this is a new character. And considering that this takes place years after the original, I'm going to assume that the reason why they didn't do Neville in this episode is to have him star in an episode where he changed for the better, but also mature for the better. Similar to Neville in the 4th season in I Pity the Neville, where he unleashed his outrage off of a child, which was recorded, and he got exposed in front of so many people all over the world. Argentina is like that character, except that she's manipulating women. Believe it or not, she even called them completely stupid. 3 million of them. And the reason for that is that she is spying on people, even in Carly's apartment. Believe it or not, Neville wouldn't even spy on Carly whatsoever. I mean, he did that in I Rule the Day, but that was mostly on an act for revenge. This, however, Argentina is just doing this for profit. Let me just say this right now. Neville wanted to get something from Carly, gain a kiss or receiving an apology from her from completely attacking him. But in this episode, the fact that Argentina is just doing all this for profit by completely spying on people, this is basically truth or square levels of completely having Mr. Krabs doing this for money. But at least in this episode, Argentina isn't like Mr. Krabs. Mostly the fact that we already knew Mr. Krabs from 1999. Argentina is a new character, and every time I completely see what she's trying to do, she instantly doesn't get any credibility because of her actions. Believe it or not, that is something that you should do by making a character like this, especially for a revival. And just seeing Carly in this scenario, she has changed, and she isn't the same compared to how she was in the original. And as for Harper, she was one of those women that would have been manipulated, but at the same time, thanks to our best friend Carly, that didn't happen. All in all, I actually think that Harper in this episode is actually at her most best when it comes to her character and how she was this close, but then Carly managed to stop that from happening. If you really expect me to believe that Harper deserves some slack, mainly the actress playing Harper, then no, I really don't. Because for me personally, I actually think that Harper is a lot more entertaining the more I watch these episodes. Granted, what she wants to do is to have her working space at somewhere else where it's not in her apartment that is completely crowded with Carly space, but on the other hand, I actually feel like the whole line of dialogue and the fact that she is mostly good when it comes to fashion design, she's kind of like Raven from That's So Raven, except that she isn't like Raven, because at the same time, she is also her own character, which is why I can give Harpo so much credit. So if I say if it wasn't for Spencer dating Argentina, then I'm pretty sure that I wouldn't be able to see Harpo as a much entertaining character compared to the other characters from the original. Like I said, we're still in the first season, and as of now, there are more than 10 episodes being released on Paramount Plus, even though I'm watching these episodes on a different website. But before we get into the ending of this episode, let's discuss the subplot, which is another Freddy and Missalent relationship subplot. Missalent is part of a scout team called the Sunshine Girls, which is, they did appear in the original in one episode or two. And let me just say this right now, remember in the previous episode review when I say that Freddy is basically in the same position as he was in the original, while Missalent is basically Sam all over again? Well, as it turns out, I was completely wrong. Freddy wants Millicent to earn money on her own, while he gets carried away with other activities. In all honesty, remember when Freddy was mostly mistreated as a techno dude in the original, mostly because of the abuse he gets from Sam? Well, I guess that they didn't want to do the same thing in this revival, so that they actually made Freddy mostly a brother who just isn't really into most of the stuff and just trying to help his adopted sister in order to work things out on their own. And when I say on their own, I mean mostly the other Sunshine Girls. All I can say is that Missalent in this show really feels like she wants to do something by being with her adopted brother, but at the same time, it really feels like that Freddy's mom just wants Freddy to cooperate with someone in order to be mostly related to that person. I don't know if I'm ever going to say this again, but Freddy's mom is actually a genius for adopting Missalent. I know it's actually sound crazy considering that Freddy's mom is definitely a psychopath, but on the other hand, that really made me so shocked that I was able to say those words in this video. Freddy was having a difficult time to gain along with Missalent, but at the same time he was focusing on other things, and considering that Freddy was literally the only person that his mother truly cared about in the original, I got a feeling that they only did this just so that Freddy can have an additional character that he can slowly relate to as the episodes continue. Let me just say this right now. This is what a revival should do. Add new characters and add some tweaks towards the original characters. But at the same time, it's really obvious of what a revival should do. And the fact that if this was actually a reboot, I'm pretty sure it wouldn't make any difference. And every time I see Missalent on screen, she just instantly becomes a lot more likable while also making Freddy slightly likable as each episode passes. Every time I completely see Freddy in this scenario, it really feels like that he's no longer a techno person like he was in the original. Although he still does the techno stuff when it comes to the moments that he's alone. So I can easily tell that this subplot actually teach me something of what this revival is different compared to the original. But at the same time, later episodes could easily change on that, so who knows. Now let's get into the ending of this episode. After Spencer and Harpo saw the storage room with the security footage in Leapin, they immediately rushed back to their apartment, well technically Spencer's apartment, and warn Carly about what is truly going on with Argentina. And since that Argentina completely exposes to them about her disastrous plan into fooling nearly 3 million people, Carly actually had the camera on the entire time. And considering that we never see Argentina in the aftermath of this episode, mostly the fact that she either just hides herself in shame while also still throwing profit by spying on other people, I'm going to assume that she really didn't think ahead of time, and the fact that Carly actually recorded everything. Granted, it was mostly for luck involving Carly, but at the same time, this is similar to having a character making a speech and then not noticing that there were people watching her, which is a reference from the That's So Raven episode where Chelsea gets a standing ovation for almost becoming president in that episode from season 1. Except in this, the character ends up suffering consequences, even though it didn't happen, since that she gave the flash drive back to Harper in order to prevent herself being exposed in front of so many people off of Carly's website. In all honesty, this ending really sums up the writing in this, but at the same time, I actually appreciate it a lot more. As for Harper's space solution, Spencer allows her to have most of her clothing in his apartment. Let me just say this right now, I really feel like that every time I rewatch an episode like this, or a future episode involving the revival, it really feels like that this show is trying to take some risks, but at the same time, it's not afraid to expose its new stories involving these new characters. And the fact that they add new traits towards the new characters to make them interesting, it made me appreciate this episode a lot more, making it one of my most favorite episodes from this season. Well, when it comes to underrated, but that's mostly from other people's opinions. Let me just say this, I really feel like that this revival is doing a good job to having new changes but not going way too far on being different. And since I'm this invested with this revival, I might have plans on reviewing another episode from it for my November schedule, but at the same time, I don't know what that episode is going to be, and like I said, it could be on debate if I want to do another episode review from this revival. I might review something from the original, but at the same time, with the amount of episodes that the revival is receiving when it comes to the variety of ideas that they have, it's going to be a lot more difficult to pick which episode is the right choice. But who knows? I give this episode an 8 out of 10.
Let's get this started again. Me and my whole crew.